Can you turn it down just a little bit? Wow. All right, so this guy doesn't need any introduction. Most everybody knows who Bruce is, and if you were in here about an hour ago, you saw him cycling in his spandex, which was awesome. And so here we go, Bruce.
Hello. Half-assed applause at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. People, what the hell's going on? Normally I don't sit down, but you'll pardon me if I do sit for at least a little bit. I'm a little tired. I have been sitting all day. Unlike you, I've been doing something. It's going to be that kind of... That was good. You're like 8 feet away and you still missed. My head's not that small, as it turns out. All right, anyway, first thing I need to do, there's a few things I didn't mention before. What the hell is that thing? It's an alien. Who's the corporate symbol? Anyone? Bueller? Free. It's the free here. Jesus, that wasn't even a good story. So we did this ride, and honest to God, it was a miscommunication between myself and JP. We were talking about he's getting into cycling, and I've been doing it for a while, and we're chatting about it. And he says, hey, we should do a ride at DEF CON in Las Vegas. And what I heard was, hey, we should do a ride to DEF CON in Las Vegas. I'm like, that's an awesome idea. I've been thinking about that for a while. So I send him this email with cross-country routes and training and all this stuff, and he writes back, he's like, this is awesome. I just want to let you know that I'm totally down with it, but all I said was we should go to Las Vegas and do a ride there, like rent some bikes, maybe do like 30 miles or something. Like, I'm okay with 100 times more mileage, but we're going to have to plan. So this ride was the first big ride of 3 we're going to do. We're going to do another one up the coast next year, and then we're going to go cross-country the year after. So I forgot to thank our support team today, JP's dad, Art, and then my family, Heidi, Taryn, Bobby, and Daxton, drove along. So a little round of applause. And we had some sponsors, 2 of which are companies that either my wife or I own. It's funny what you can call a business expense. And we also have coupons for road IDs. So road IDs are these little things you can wear on your wrist or your feet or your ankle or whatever that have your name and other personal identifying information that's probably illegal to post on the internet. But the idea is if you get hit by a truck and you're laying on the side of the road, the paramedics can look really quick and figure out what medication you're on and that kind of thing. We have coupons for $2 off road ID. The guys who make these things don't make a lot of cash on the deal. They're just kind of doing it because they don't want cyclists to die. It's really funny because I was talking to this guy at a bar once who didn't know I cycled. And he says, oh, what's that thing in your wrist? I'm like, oh, it's in case I get hit by a truck. And he kind of looks at me. Do you worry about that a lot? Like specifically, do you worry about getting hit by a truck a lot, or is it just in general vehicles? I'm like, oh no, it's for when I'm biking. He's like, oh, that makes a hell of a lot more sense because you sounded psychotic. So anyway, come find us if you want to buy a road ID. They're really stylish. They have non-offensive colors, but this seems to be a very offensive conference. Funny joke. There you go. That one was actually going to hit me. There seem to be a lot of pen testing talks today, and so I'm going to do some kind of antithesis of pen testing and talk about defense. Ooh, how boring. Yeah, whatever. And actually, the point I want to drive home today is effectively that when we talk about defense and we worry about defending networks, we spend an awful lot of time worrying about shit that doesn't matter. We debate to the nth degree little minutia of configuration options and other odds and ends. And at the end of the day, it's a really bad battle we're fighting right now. So stop worrying about the little bits and worry about the big picture. So what I first want to show is this graph that Neil Provost and crew from Google released this year. Every year, Niels Provost and his team from Google release seemingly at Usenix Security every year a study of malware born through web pages. And it's fantastic work because they have kind of a large database at Google of web pages. I don't know if you've heard of them. But they can do a lot of analysis. They've got a very sophisticated VM technology where they can go reach, grab web pages, see how malicious they are, see what malicious payloads are in them, what exploits they're trying to use, and they can run these things en masse in data centers the size of small states. And that's effectively what they do. And so one thing that Niels has done is he's been tracking for the last 4 years the various malware and particularly Microsoft vulnerabilities that are being targeted by drive-by malware on websites. And so this chart is a little difficult to see, but the idea is on the y-axis are the various Microsoft. Bye, Rogue. I don't like you either. No, you lie. Oh, jeez. Do I want to be? No. I'll be asleep, curled up fetally if I have a beer. It would be really embarrassing. So on the right-hand side are the Microsoft vulnerability IDs for various vulnerabilities that have been in use. On the bottom is time. What you'll see is that there is kind of a progression where the color, the depth of the color, how intense the black is what percentage of vulnerabilities or exploits during that time exercise that vulnerability. So, sir. Are you shitting me? So what? It's not really cool. Everyone's going to see my desktop now. Turn off mirroring. We'll start with that. There we go. What do you want it? That ain't happening. I can do 14 by 9, 1440 by 9. Does that work? Sweet. This is how useful Macs are. We can do 16 by 2. Oh, yeah, you think? Because it's weird here too now. I'm not sure what to do except push on. No, it really won't. I'm not joking. Oh, here, hold on. Where's my mouse? Anyone see it? Okay, I can't read anything. So is there, what? That one? Oh shit. that one? Oh, keep going? Oh Christ. That one? Winner, winner, chicken dinner. All right. And that's my talk. Any questions? Right click. 2 fingers. Turns out it's the easiest right click in the world. Does that show up okay now? Okay. Learn something new every day. I had a point. I forget what the hell it was. Hey, Rogue came back. You weren't lying. Cute. Anyway, so what I really want to drive home here is there's been a lot of vulnerabilities found in Microsoft products. You know what people keep doing with them? Using them. Is that going to change? Nope. So who gives a shit, right? Why do you care about the y-axis? Maybe for patching purposes. But beyond that, does the minutia of what's actually happening and what's changing and what all these vulnerabilities are really matter? You know, at the top of this graph are the guys that are running organized crime rings and running botnets going to go, oh, Niels Provost, he reached the top of the y-axis. I guess we're done. There's going to be no more. Thank you, sir. So the point is, first of all, not to be petty, but you do have to learn the details. I'm a college dropout. I went to the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Any other UAF? Yeah, my wife. Really? UAF, sir? Seriously? No shit. When were you there? You got me beat by a few years. Did you graduate? Sweet, he didn't graduate either. We are 0 for 3. State schools in Alaska. Woo! There's a lot of like 9th year seniors up there. But I did go to school for actually like 4 or 5, 6 years. It was kind of confusing. I kept going on to academic probation and then coming back off of it because I was like attend class and then not attend and whatever. And so I stuck around for a long time. But the fact of the matter was I did learn a lot. I just didn't actually get the degree. And I think it's important to understand that you have to have some basis in the technology that we're dealing with in order to understand what's happening on a day-to-day basis. So I don't mean to stand up here and say, you know what, everyone should just be a frickin', suit-wearing consultant and, charge a lot of money and not have a goddamn clue what they're talking about, right? You need to pay your dues. You need to learn all the stuff that you're supposed to know in order to do your job, right? You need to know how layer 2 works. God help you. Please understand how layer 2 works. It's amazing how many people I bump into that out doing jobs and they really actually have no concept what lives below IP. I talk about an Ethernet frame and VLAN tagging and you get some blank stares. I'm like, go back and read. It's only like a chapter. You only have to read like a chapter to understand it. Please, God, go read and understand how layer 2 works. Write some languages, understand how to build exploits. Do the cool stuff. Get your hands dirty, right? You've got to know this. But at the end of the day, applying that knowledge ends up having a very tiny blast radius, right? You got to learn all this stuff. And then once you've learned it, throw it all the hell out the window, right? You don't need to get buried down in the weeds all the time. It's fun, it's cool, and there are people that make a good living doing it. But when it comes to defense, I'm not talking about building exploits. I'm not talking about, going out and being a hot shit pen tester and attacker. You're down in the weeds all day long if you're doing that stuff. For the people doing defense, though, are the attackers going to stop attacking? No. Are they really going to change tactics rapidly? Not really. So learn the details, learn what you need to know to do your job, and move the hell on. So we take, as an example, a vulnerability is found, right? Vulnerability is disclosed to the vendor. What happens? Well, invariably, one of the first things that happens is someone, first post in the Metasploit subversion framework, woohoo! Someone writes an exploit and shoves it into Metasploit, okay? At this point, we can assume it's been weaponized, right? It's not hard to press the button that says attack and get your shell, okay? We've all done it. I've taught classes to people who couldn't really turn on a computer or log into Linux, but you know what they could use? Metasploit. Oh, so I just type in, what's an IP address again? Oh, okay, and they type in the IP address and attack, and they're like, oh, I guess I have control of the machine now. I'm like, yeah, you didn't know what an IP address is, but you have a root shell. Like, that's this is the point where I should stop teaching. And then attackers, they make the same decision, the bad guys, not the pen testers, the legitimate bad dudes that are out there. They make the same decisions as any other business person does. You use an attack as long as it's relevant, as long as it gets you the results that you want. So once a vulnerability has been disclosed publicly, the utility of that exploit starts to go downhill. If you presume there was ODay that was exploiting that vulnerability prior, the attackers pretty much had free reign to run around and do whatever the hell they want. Now the vulnerability has been disclosed, and that window of utility is going to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink. So the vulnerability gets patched at some point, right? This is all pretty much common sense. And the users take some non-trivial amount of time to apply it. It's amazing. Your grandmother, for instance, will not apply any patches. You walk into her house and her XP box is like, pop-ups everywhere, and there's porn. Like, oh, Grandma, you like porn? Like, I do now. Like, okay, that's disturbing. And eventually, the vulnerability uses utility and becomes fodder for crappy pen testing courses. Anyone take a pen testing course where they show a vulnerability that's more than 5 years old? Right, yeah. You use it in the wild much? No. But it sure is easy to reuse over and over and over again. So at the end of the day, this happens, wash, rinse, repeat, all the frickin' time. Does a specific exploit really matter? I mean, honest to God, like, I'm all for, like, figuring out where the weaknesses are and that kind of thing. But again, when it comes to defending your network, do you really need to know the minutia, the detail of how an exploit works and how the vulnerability works? It's got an ID. I can track a patch to determine if my workstation has been patched against that ID. If it's been patched, move the hell on. Get on with your life. Don't worry about it. It's not that important. Another thing that we lose track of sometimes is how technology really works. This is one of those going back to the education versus kind of conventional wisdom. So we talk about SSL. And this has been a really fantastic case study the last few months. For a long time, people have known that there's a really big problem with SSL. Huge problem. What's the biggest problem with SSL that we've had and everyone's complained about for the last 10 years and hasn't been addressed? Trust. Right. We kind of know that answer now because some CAs really got screwed, right? Maybe 6 months ago, if I asked that same question in the room here, I don't know that I would have gotten at least a rumbling of trust from 4 or 5 people who were paying attention to me. You talk about key length, and you worry about, oh, God, you're using this cipher or that cipher, or your key length isn't long enough. Go show me an enterprise that was popped because they weren't using long enough key lengths, right? Anyone ever done that? Anyone ever rolled up and said, oh, 1024, watch this, bitches. 5 years later, I got it! Right? No, it doesn't happen, right? And there's certainly some weaknesses in how people can have SSL configured and whatnot. But at the end of the day, all this box checking that goes on with, PCI compliance. Oh, you're not right. Someone gave me some shit once because I wasn't running the right cipher on my freaking web server, and I swear to God, I wanted to beat them. I'm like, there are other things in the world to worry about than that, than the PCI Council's checklist of here's all the things you need to do, the specific cipher, the specific key length. It's bullshit when some guy can go and pop DigiNotar and issue himself star.star.com, right? I don't know what I want to pop, but I'll just assume everything. I win. Holy crap, man. Like, I was reading through all the keys that guy caught, that I got to, like they were all targeted, star.star.org, star.star.com. I'm like, oh, you just gave the hell up. He's like, it's late. This is a really long list, and I don't want to cut and paste it anymore. Fuck it. That's horrific. Oh, and hey, how do we update that list of trusted CAs? It's all real time, right? We have OCSP deployed, and we can get certs revoked, and we can even pull out untrusted routes after they get compromised really easily. Bullshit. You need to download a new version of your browser to get a new flat file that has hundreds of CAs in it that you're all supposed to intrinsically trust. Bullshit. DigiNotar was approved by, what, PwC? To have the highest level of, whatever certification to be able to issue whatever the hell freaking keys they want to, and then they get popped. These guys only issued like a couple hundred certs in their lifetime. They're basically a CA to facilitate a PKI system within the EU. Did you care about PKIs for individual users in UK systems, sir? Probably not. Not so much. But you know what? All your browsers trusted these guys. Firefox, IE, Safari, woo, Safari. Everybody trusted them. Why? That's just the way we do it, right? Like, we needed to have a business, and people needed to sell certs, and so you convinced the browser vendors that, hey, cool, check that out, Did the PCI Council, when they come through and look for PCI compliance, do they ask, hey, what CAs are you trusting? Is that on the checklist? Is it? For what, the browsers? For your users? Look at trusted certs and keys. What does that mean? Okay. If Firefox has them in the list, you know what most people do? Trust the fuck out of them. That's a good old amount of trust right there. So, thank God I'm my own employer. So, you're planning on fixing that. Good work, because how long have we known about this problem? A long time, right? And it's funny, you can go back and you read mailing list posts and you go to conferences and look at proceedings in the past. This is something that's been talked about a lot, right? But nobody wanted to address it. Nobody wanted to address it. Instead, it's easier to say, hey, jackass, use 2048 instead of 1024. Because that's a real threat against internet commerce, not star.star.com wildcard certs. That's not a threat at all. What the hell? Speaking of PCI, just going to kind of, I know that Nickerson's coming up after me and talk about compliance, so I'm just going to steal some of his thunder right now. He'll be beating me in the back parking lot later. I'll be enjoying it. So Verizon's data breach report says, hey, there's a bunch of people that got popped that weren't PCI compliant. Basically, you're 60% less likely to suffer a breach if you are PCI compliant. 60%. Not in order of magnitude, 60%. You're a little more than half was less likely to suffer a breach if you've gone through and spent, depending on your size, $150K to $2.7 million to be PCI compliant. You're about half better than you were before. That's awesome. Come on, are you serious? This is not really one of those examples of a good way to make people more secure, to reduce breaches, to be able to say, hey, look, this is really the way we need to do business, okay? I'm not, and as much as I'm up here, I'm railing on PCI and whatever, it's a start. Like, someone's holding merchants accountable, and that's really important, because back in the day, I tried to run I was a startup up in Anchorage, Alaska, and we were building a nationwide transaction processing network for credit cards. This story ends well, I'm sure. What it ends with is a big bonfire with $3 million on it. But at the time, there was really no control over what merchants, card processors, banks were doing on the internet. And it boiled down to kind of like a loose approximation of, hey, do I trust you? Kind of like certs in your browsers. And they would just be like, yeah, we'll give you access to the credit card networks. We'll let you clear credit cards. So it was a pretty loosey-goosey kind of thing. And there were a lot of problems with it. So PCI has been an honest attempt, I think, to make things better. But it's certainly something that I think people lose sight on. When you spend $1 million and you're only 50% less likely to get attacked or be successfully attacked, is that really worth it? Is that the best way to have spent $1 million? I don't know. Passwords. So password selection. This is an interesting problem. Passwords are all about stealing them and cracking them, right? I mean, when you're an attacker, that's your goal in life. I want to steal a bunch of hashes, and I want to crack them. So what you say is, we need really complex passwords that are hard to crack, right? I mean, that's the way it goes. I mean, you have these complexity requirements. How many orders of complexity do your users have to have? 2, 3, 4? Do they have to have non-printable ASCII characters in them? You know, I want to use ASCII 123 and then 156, and that's an umlaut. I don't know how to type it, but I'll just 2 periods and a couple of up arrows, and we'll see what happens. It turns out that a lot of the complexity that we talk about is totally artificial, right? When you think about having short, complex passwords, why do we do that? Memory. Yeah, we used to only be able to do 8-character passwords. So if you wanted hard-to-crack 8-character passwords, what'd you do? Make them 4 frickin' orders of complexity in them. Put umlauts and crap. And that's what people did. So we have this mentality that more complex passwords are more better. But in reality, difficulty to crack is the most important bit, right? So now we use hashing algorithms that are pretty sophisticated, and you can feed effectively infinite amounts of data into them, and they will just kind of hash the hell out of it, and then you get a value, right? It's not complicated. Windows has long since given up having 7 and 7 all to upward and stored really crappily, right? Like, we threw that out the window a long time ago, and most places don't do it anymore, and TLM, anyway. Sometimes you're lucky enough to stumble in some place like, oh, really? Like, I'll crack your entire password database now. There, we're done. But if they're using a reasonable hash, they're storing them reasonably, difficulty to crack is king. Does that mean highly complex passwords? No. That can mean all kinds of things. Long passwords, passphrases, 5 or 6 words that people can remember take a long damn time to crack compared to 7, 8, 9-character passwords with 3 or 4 orders of complexity, right? And you know what? Your users are happier because they don't have to remember how to type the goddamn umlaut. They don't have to write the password down, okay? How many people have actually, this is an honest question, compromised the network because of a written down password? Text file account is not a written down password. That's a hard drive. I mean, actually, like on a sticky note on the bottom of the keyboard. You guys, okay, cool. You guys had physical access, right? Have you ever done it without physical access? Shut up. Johnny, go home. Also not written down if it's in a Google search. If you can find me a picture in Google of someone's password written down and then you used it to crack it, I'll give you $100. On the webcam. Street view, because I walk around, my password is. Here comes the car. They'll erase your face, but the password will still be there. Man, that sounds like fun. I swear to God, if I ever see the Google car, I'm going to write my password down and like. Were they really here yesterday? Oh, damn it. I'm going to have to keep my password written down just for that kind of situation. You need physical access to do it. And while people sometimes do have physical access, there's a lot of times when if I'm on the other side of the country and I'm doing a pen test, I can't pick up someone's keyboard and look under it. But regardless, people are apt to write down complex passwords that they can't remember. And as we saw by show of hands, that gives it up sometimes. If you want your passwords to be secure, focus on the real issue at hand, which is difficulty to crack, not complexity, okay? Complexity is an artificial metric that we use because we used to be jammed into very short passwords. And once we had the ability to store longer passwords, we thought, we can store 1,000 character passwords. So we'll go from 8 to 10 characters, and we'll still have complexity of 3. What? No. No, no, no. Don't do that, please, God. Anyway, the other thing, what you really need to focus on is the fact that your users are dumber than a bag of rocks, and they're going to get phished. Even the smart users are going to get phished, right? This is how you get in. Who's phished an account before doing a pen test? Right. I mean, this is what happens, right? I mean, you go in, you send them an email. We did we did a job for a client once, and I'm sure you all have stories like this, but we went off and registered what I guess is now, according to the news article I read the other day, a doppelganger domain. So this is a domain that simply doesn't have the dot between the host name and the domain name, and they use it for things like, oh, I don't know, VPNing in. And so we took like vpn.company.com and just registered vpncompany.com, wrote a little script, you know, pulled down the passwords off the web page and looked exactly like their VPN gateway. When, per the rules of engagement, before we phished them, we had to tell them, hey, we're about to phish. Is it okay? And they had to hack it. Well, I went to go check the log file before I sent in my request in the rules of engagement to actually start it, and we'd actually already got like 7 people. It had been up for 12 hours, and people had already typoed, fat-fingered the VPN host name, and we were like, oh, we don't need to phish them. As it turns out, we already won. The outbrief for that was comical, because the CEO's like, can you repeat that? I'm like, sure, I'm happy to repeat it. You guys didn't do anything, and we still won. They're like, oh, that's not good. I'm like, no, as a matter of fact, it's not. That's what you should be dealing with. From a defensive perspective, you know, again, there's a point at which when the attacker is inside your network and they've got things like your entire hash password database, you can assume it's a bad day. Okay? It's probably an unrecoverably bad day. This isn't the kind of day you wash your hands and go, oh, that's better. This is the kind of day you're like, I hope I have my job tomorrow. So what happens when you get phished? What happens when they steal that whole database? Maybe you should look at doing two-factor authentication? I don't know. Maybe you should look at other ways of authenticating users? There's a lot of opportunity here, but at the end of it, having an inanely long debate about complexity of a password is completely counterproductive when your users are busy giving passwords to attackers in the clear on web pages that they have created and phished them and whatever, right? This is, I mean, it's common sense, but I've sat in so many meetings and talked to so many people over the years that have these stupid debates. Oh, God, you know, is 2, 3 levels of complexity enough? Shut the fuck up and do your job. Okay. In that same realm, I'm trying to be pragmatic, okay? Honest to God, like I'm up here just ranting and swearing and trying to corrupt my children, and I'm trying to be as pragmatic as I can without actually giving any technical detail. So far, I think it's been successful. One of the other holy wars I see fought is this stupid, like, configuring a firewall. First of all, is there any discriminator in the firewall market right now when you buy a firewall? Like, it either sucks or it doesn't, and you buy the ones that don't suck. I mean, that's pretty much what I've determined. Like, we've had firewalls for a few years. And the last time I advised a client to buy a firewall, I'm like, don't buy any of those. You can buy anything else. Like, just go out and install them. They work. They block packets. If they don't block packets, they don't work. And if they crash a lot, they also, by definition, don't work. And don't use those ones. Other than that, just buy one. Move on with your life. There's a lot of IP addresses. A large number. We could talk about the IP address v4 shortage if you like, but that's a whole different rant that I won't get into. There's a lot of ports, and there's a very, very, very large combination of IP addresses and ports when it comes to source and destination and what you're trying to allow through. So you know what the stupidest debate in the world is? And I've seen it, and you've all probably seen it too. Hey, I've got 2 systems on the inside. One's a server, another one's a server. They need to talk to each other. Well, that server's so old, it requires me to open 16 ports, and we're not going to do it. Shut the fuck up. Really? Like, you're going to worry about not opening ports between one host and another host because too many ports have to be opened. Honest to God. People heard this argument before? You sat in these meetings where people are arguing to the nth degree, like, we can't open that many ports. Yeah, you can, because it has to happen, right? The business needs to exist. If you can find someone that can inject traffic between server A and server B on those 16 ports and take over that communication, your day is, again, by definition, really bad. Right? This isn't something arbitrarily you're going to launch in, you know, Peyton Manning style. Oh, wait, sorry, that's you know, a little bit south of Indiana, and it hits a little home for, yeah, anyway. You know, You can't attack that from the outside. Even on the, even if this is a public-facing thing, it's really hard post, I don't know, 1999 to inject traffic into blind TCP sessions, right? We've figured out TCP sequence numbers. It's hard to inject into a session blind when you can't see it. And most of the traffic that goes on the internet, you're blind to. I hate to tell you, but you don't get to see it. So having these stupid debates about, oh, well, this server needs to be fixed and I'm only going to allow one port is, again, completely counterproductive. Why do companies exist? Make money. They don't exist to pay the security team. It's really hard for the security team to understand that sometimes. They think that the company's sole existence is to do whatever the hell they say they should do. And that's just not the case. I challenge you to find any company whose mission statement is pay the IT security team very well. And we're going to do that by selling styrofoam cups or making Teflon or inventing space travel or whatever the hell it is. That sounds like a good way to keep those IT guys happy. You have to remember when you do this for a living, you're doing it to support some business objective. And it's really, 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 really hard to keep that in context. I've sat on the other side of the phone and in person and listened to these kind of conversations, and it makes me want to quit, right? I mean, it really makes me want to quit. I won't, because it is lucrative. But it's amazing what you'll do for money. How advanced is APT? Now we're going down to like, oh, let's define a hacker. So I'm right at the edge. I'm at the precipice here. But this has been actually debated a lot publicly over the last year and a half, since the Google Aurora stuff really came to light and this term kind of came out of the background and entered the public domain. So, how advanced are they? Are the attacks that they use against Google, against these people, the attacks that lots of companies are seeing right now, are they really advanced? You know what? Shut the hell up. The ends justify the means. No one gives a shit how elite you are if you got in. It's binary. Did you get access to the network? Yes. You win. Did you use some really creative way? Did you use some O-Day? No, dude. I used a 7-year-old vulnerability, and I fished some guy. Cool. All right, man. Way to take the easy road. Whether or not you are owned is a binary operation. And how difficult it is to get in doesn't matter. What matters is people, again, attackers, it's a risk-reward trade-off, right? They're going to use the cheapest, easiest, most non-obvious method to get in that they can in order to achieve their objective, right? Are they going to go research a bunch of O-Day? Are they going to go tear apart Windows to find vulnerabilities if they can use canned exploits from wherever on the internet to go pop people and get in? No. Would you do that as a pen tester? Were you like, you know what? This is going to be an $80,000 pen test, and I'm going to use some yet undiscovered O-Day in Oracle. Oh, no, that's not fair. In Windows. Yeah, I hope I get in. No, that's not how you do. You don't run a pen test like that. And that's not what attackers do either. Attackers take the easiest way into the network. And so having this debate about advanced, when you talk about APT, is not really, in my mind, a discussion of technically what the hell they're doing. Because technically anyone in this room could carry out the same kind of attack. The issue is really motivation and, frankly, the fact that they're targeting you in the first place. That's the really scary thing. I've fought battles against organized crime groups, targeting specific companies. And the response from the company, and one of them was a bank, they had an entire floor of a high-rise dedicated to responding to this attack, right? Hundreds of people, financial forensics experts, customer service people, IT security people, you name it. And we're probably battling 10 people somewhere in an Eastern European country, right? That was very asymmetric. That was fantastically asymmetric. But you know what they were doing all the time? Targeting us. You know what we were doing all the time? Defending against them. Were we dealing with any other part of the business very effectively? No. We were dealing with those 10 people who were trying to attack us, and they were dealing with us. That's pretty advanced. That's not screwing around. They wanted our money, and they were going to do whatever they could to get it, and we were going to try to stop them, right? It's the motivation, I think, that scares me, and the ease at which they can carry it out. And I apologize to any Allie North fans in the room, but I remember as a kid watching the Allie North trials. Anyone get to watch the Allie North trials as a kid? Yeah. It's very interesting because I barely understood any of it. But I do remember the whole do the ends justify the means, you know, and when it comes to pwning, absolutely. You know, use whatever means you can. You won't be a girl if you flip that binary bit from unowned to pwned. You're fine. Anyway, this was all over the damn map. Are there any questions? I don't remember at all. Yes? Why? Because no one donated. At least no one said they donated. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, I'll retweet this on Twitter. But retweeting on Twitter doesn't actually count as opening your pocketbook. You already gave me money, Johnny. What? Pocketbook. I use the term pocketbook. That's pretty retro, man. My grandmother would be proud of that. Any actual real questions? I don't know how you could have any, because all I did was really just kind of get up and rant. But I also got DerbyCon back on time. See? Look at that. You're all thinking, like, I didn't learn a goddamn thing, but at least the next talk will go on at 3. Anyway, thank you very much. If you want to find us again later for Road ID coupons, please ride safe. Talk to you guys later.